A famous education psychologist once said, "Education is what survives when what has been learned has been forgotten." Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon to our panel of speakers, viewers, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you everyone for making the time to be with us today. Welcome to our webinar on strengthening school-based assessment, empowering teachers in the classroom. I'm Nur Izni binti Muhammad Hassan from ELTC and I'll be your moderator. Let me share the line of discussion for today's webinar. First, we'll be listening to a teacher's voice on her understanding of classroom assessment and the challenges faced in implementing classroom assessment, especially during this home-based teaching and learning, or what we know as PDPR. The teacher will also share some strategies on how teachers conduct classroom assessment. Next, the session will focus on an in-depth discussion on the National Educational Assessment System. Then, we'll move forward to talk about how classroom assessment is different from what have been done by the teachers in the classrooms before, as well as how classroom assessment should be conducted. That's quite a bit that we're going to talk about today, but I guess these are the important aspects that we need to focus on. Let me now introduce our panel of speakers for today. With us this afternoon, Acik Nurul Nakiah binti Abdullah, an English language teacher from SMK Tengku Bariah, Terengganu, Dr. Abdul Hadi bin Maddawi, and Encik Zulkifli bin Mahyudin, both from the Institute of Teacher Training, Ipoh Campus. Ladies and gentlemen, we're also very privileged to have with us Dr. Hajah Rahimah binti Adam from the Examinations Syndicate. Thank you all for being with us today. I'd also like to introduce and thank the Head of Department and academic lecturers of the Department of Assessment and Evaluation, Dr. T. Vanita, Daughter of Tanabalan, Puan Hardip Kaur, Daughter of Darshan Singh, Puan Hajah Munirah binti Hariri, and Puan Nurliana binti Ismail, who have helped in making this webinar successful. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a QR code being displayed. Please scan the code for SPLKPM registration. The registration link will also be provided in the YouTube chat box. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, kindly type them in the chat box. Ladies and gentlemen, assessment is a fundamental part of the teaching and learning process. Teachers conduct various kinds of assessment in the classrooms to evaluate learners' abilities. The last decade has seen a dynamic change in the assessment system in education. Formative school-based assessment has taken a center stage worldwide, and much attention is given to performance-based assessment. Ladies and gentlemen, in Malaysia, the Ministry of Education has announced a policy on the strengthening of school-based assessment starting 2021. This is in line with the Ministry's aspiration to move forward from exam-oriented learning to a more holistic education system, which puts emphasis on developing learners' potential comprehensively and holistically. The strengthening of SBA will look into enhancing the implementation of the 5 assessment modes, namely, the classroom assessment, pentaksiran bilik darjah, the central assessment, pentaksiran pusat, the physical activities, sports and co-curricular assessment, PAJSK, and the psychometric assessment, pentaksiran psychometric, as well as standardized and centralized examinations. Please take note that throughout the webinar, the term classroom assessment and pentaksiran bilik darjah, PBD, will be used interchangeably by the panel of speakers. To start off the discussion, it's with great pleasure that I'd like to invite Cik Nakia to share with us her understanding of classroom assessment.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon to all. Thank you, Puan Izmi. It's a wonderful opportunity to be able to take part in this webinar. Thank you, ELTC, for the kind invitation. Ladies and gentlemen, what is classroom assessment, or known as Pentaksiran Bilik Darjah PBD? I believe PBD is a term that all teachers nationwide are familiar with. Well, it refers to an ongoing evaluation that teachers carry out continuously in schools during teaching and learning process. The purpose for PBD is to collect information about our students' progress, performance, and skills. And this can be done formatively as well as summatively. Now, the key word here is that it is a continuous process. Teachers can carry out PBD on a day-to-day basis, weekly, or even once in a few months at the end of a school syllabus. I would say that implementing effective PBD, teachers will get to explore deeper insights on learners' actual learning process taking place in classroom setting instead of measuring their performance with mere grades or numbers. Getting an A in English, for instance, means so much more than just passing 85% on papers, as now teachers can specifically identify which areas the students have or have yet to master in. There's a list of detailed can-do statements that complements the grade or band been given, and it is highly process and skill-oriented. Now, teachers, that is why the assessment elements are incorporated in the Document Standard Curriculum dan Pentaksiran known as the SKP. Ladies and gentlemen, in order to better understand how teaching and learning links to classroom assessment, perhaps it would be useful to recall the relationship between learning standards and performance standards. We all know that in the SKP document, we have learning standards derived from the content standards. These learning standards are key elements in planning our lessons. Now, when assessing students' progress, teachers use performance standards. How are they different or perhaps similar? Now, performance standards are actually referring to the learning standards covered in the lessons. And that is why, teachers, it's really important to make sure that when we teach, we should ensure our students master the skills and fulfill the learning standards that we aim to teach. This will then be reflected in the PBD record when teachers evaluate them continuously. It is also important to highlight here that the performance standards, which are used as guidance for the PBD, mirrors the learning standards derived from the SKP. Teachers thus should use performance standards to help them determine the level of their students' understanding and acquisitions of the skills taught. Now again, I would like to reiterate that PBD is not a new rocket science teaching and learning invention. I'm sure that teachers are familiar with the term formative assessment. In fact, they have been doing this formative assessment almost in all teaching and learning sessions at school, way before the implementations of KSSM or KSSR curriculum. It's wonderful to see teachers are now getting more confident and creative at assigning project-based tasks to assess their learners. Well, the good news is, kudos teachers, you have been implementing PBD all along. Perhaps it's just a matter of fixing a few how-tos and probably learn and explore various ways of assessing students in between lessons more effectively. This is important so that we can all maximize the provision of constructive feedback given to our students. I guess the key to PBD is that teachers' feedback should feed forward students' progress. Of course, this is for the next stage of their learning of a lesson. So yes, Puan Izmi, I guess that is how I understand how SBA works in a classroom setting.
Indeed, it is wonderful to see the teachers becoming more confident and creative at assessing their students through formative and summative assessment to make learning more meaningful and personalized. I like the idea of more autonomy given to the teachers, as teachers do know their learners best. You also shared the understanding that classroom assessment is looking at the progress in learning among children. That's a good conceptualization of classroom assessment. Before we go on further, can you share with us, as a teacher, what are the challenges in implementing classroom assessment, especially during this pandemic?
Thank you, Puan Izmi. Well, that's an interesting question, really. In terms of challenges, I would say personally that implementing PBD virtually is one of the biggest of all. 2020 has transformed teaching and learning process entirely far from what we have experienced before. Well, we weren't fully ready to shift physical learning online. Our teachers struggled to adapt with and manage the home-based teaching and learning, or PDPR as we call it. Little skills or professional training were given previously in the field. The biggest question of all is perhaps how we, teachers and practitioners, can best carry out PBD virtually when students are hardly participating or showing interest in the PDPR. Let's make a quick comparison here. In actual physical classroom learning, teachers can always have a face-to-face discussion or one-to-one approach with remedial students so that a more personalized feedback could be offered to them. However, when learning is shifted online, it's really challenging for us teachers to approach them, build that instant connection, and deliver impactful lessons. Well, of course, there are many factors that can affect any PDPR lessons, such as poor internet connection, limited access to gadgets, and limited literacy with certain apps or widgets. But thanks to our experience with the previous PDPR in the 2020, teachers are now trying their best to reduce these setbacks. To avoid unnecessary data usage, for example, teachers have started delivering recorded lessons instead of live ones. At one hand, this is definitely a great option to encourage students' participation. On the other, unfortunately, recorded lessons somehow lack a timely two-way communication of a real lesson. Effective comprehension checks that usually could be easily done via thumbs up, traffic light feedback, or hinge questions in between face-to-face lesson stages are now no longer there. Eventually, teachers must resort to checking their understanding via Telegram groups and WhatsApp chats. Now, assessing students in this sense, I believe, is indeed a real challenge for us. Ladies and gentlemen, alternatively, some resourceful teachers have started integrating myriad apps and learning tools to make their synchronous and asynchronous lessons engaging. They go extra miles and take initiative to attend PLC onlines to improve their skills professionally. However, regardless of this laudable effort, there seems to be one permanent missing link in the PDPR or any virtual learning. That is the distant and poor engagement between the teachers and learners in the long run. Conducting PBD in this kind of conundrum therefore seems to be like the biggest challenge for almost all teachers nationwide. Having said this, I would like to share another challenge observed at school level. Not only in the physical setting, but also in the online platform. That is teachers' readiness. How ready are we to effectively carry out PBD? Are we proficient enough, well-versed with the performance tasks in the PBD forms? Our teachers and students are given ample time to do PBD tasks. Now, these are the key questions that we need to ask ourselves. It's best to highlight that lack of support or guidance from the experts or school leaders could be among the setbacks too. I know a lot of focus have been given to our students throughout this online learning experience, but lest we forget, teachers too are learners, adult learners in this remote learning journey. It's unreasonable to ask teachers to transform their PDPR teaching overnight just because the pandemic has struck us without warning. Well, yes, teachers have been getting a lot of help from various platforms to expose them to effective ways in conducting online lessons. Well, we really welcome assistance and support from many parties in terms of sharing of skill and expertise, as well as emotional support. Lastly, I think we have a lot to be thankful, really. This new landscape of virtual learning has somehow sharpened our understanding on ways we should humanize online learning. It has been a great journey for us teachers. So yes, that's all, Puan Isni. Back to you.
Thank you, Cik Nakia. There's quite a bit of challenges out there, yeah? You mentioned that teachers struggle in coping with home-based teaching and learning, which implies poor effective comprehension checks. You also mentioned that there is distant, poor engagement between teachers and learners. With all these obstacles, Cik Nakia, how do you and your friends implement classroom assessment in the context of home-based teaching and learning?
Thank you for the question, Puan Isni. Well, to be honest, like any other teachers out there, my colleagues and I were not technologically adept when the nation hit its first MCO back then. We really took time to explore new strategies for the new home-based teaching and learning, trying to find ways on how best to conduct lessons while considering our students' limitations with gadgets and poor internet access. Allow me to share a humble experience of how we carried out PDPR. Initially, in the first PDPR, we supplemented our students with printed modules consisting of language exercises and fun project-based activities. For Form 2 students, for instance, we carried out a project-based task based on Chapter 7 Impulse 2 textbook. We provided them with a house chores report card, and on those cards, parents would need to tick and sign on the little boxes once the students completed the house chores activities. They needed to complete the task within a 2 weeks span. The task would require the learners to help their family members with the chores at home, such as washing cars, cooking meals, and cleaning bathroom daily. We encourage our students to use English periods to carry out these tasks. There was also a choice box of fun activities included, such as Instagram video review, journal writing, and scrapbook making. Well, back then in the early 2020, we didn't really have clear guidelines on how we should document our PDPRs. So we did this instead. I have to say, although it was a rather small-scale project, the response that we got from parents and students was overwhelming. And based from that experience, in the following MCO 2.0, we organized another reading-based project called Young Readers Program. This time, our school leaders, especially my principal, Mr. Arman bin A. Raza, and my English team collaborated with our school alumni to fund all Form 1 to Form 4 students with a book each. And they were encouraged to complete a list of fun reading activities throughout the English lessons. This time we had a proper documentation and the students loved the activities. They really had fun with the reading project. And although the evaluation that took place was rather informal, what mattered most was that SMK Tengku Baria students enjoyed the project and the teachers too learned from the process. This, ladies and gentlemen, may not be the perfect example of a classroom assessment, but I suppose these could be some of the options for PBD. Now, as we march through 2021, we could see massive improvements in terms of quality classroom assessment carried out by our teachers. As a fellow teacher myself, I have to say that Malaysian educators really thrive and grow despite the technological limitations we previously had and still have. Teachers adopt and adapt various apps and online teaching platforms such as Jamboard, Classcake, Google Documents, Padlet, and many more, just to make learning more engaging and personalized. Some even have gone extra miles by creating YouTube channels for digital sharing. Now, if you could see on the slide, ladies and gentlemen, these are among the examples of our best teacher practices for PBD, and I believe there are more out there that go unnoticed. Well done, teachers. Now, after all, I think shifting physical classroom online is not entirely a bad idea. Both teachers and students are gradually developing digital competence, which I believe would be a requisite for future job market. So I guess that's about it. Thank you so much, Puan Izni, for the opportunities for me to explain the way we conduct our online classes. I'm sure there are plenty out there that we have yet to explore. Thank you.
Very enthusiastic and creative teachers we have indeed. I heard that there are many groups of teachers sharing their resources and ideas via Facebook and other platforms on social media. Ladies and gentlemen, in every cloud, there is a silver lining. Amidst the pandemic and the struggle to adapt to new ways of teaching and learning, we have a great reservoir of shared materials and ideas from teachers for teachers. Kudos to you and your friends, Cik Nakia. Cik Nakia also mentioned the need for a change in mindset. Teachers are not ready, and perhaps they do not get the support from the school management, etc. Could it be due to a lack of understanding on the whole idea of school-based assessment generally and classroom assessment specifically? I think at this point it will be apt to discuss the policy and concepts of SBA so that we get a clearer view. For this, I'm indeed pleased to invite Dr. Hajah Rahimah from the Examinations Syndicate to give us an overview of the policy. Please welcome Dr. Rahimah.
Thank you, Puan Izni. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon to everyone present today. First of all, I would like to thank ELTC for giving me this great opportunity to be part of this webinar. Thank you very much, Cik Nurul Nakia, for sharing on the various challenges in implementing classroom assessment. But Alhamdulillah, you have managed to overcome the challenges and have succeeded in carrying out interesting projects for your learners to do while they are still at home. Not only will it be fun for the learners, but I'm sure it will be very meaningful to them. Their parents will definitely be happy to see their children helping out with house chores. And they must be very grateful to you, Cik Nakia. A good way of empowering teachers with their teaching and learners with their learning, giving autonomy to them, taking accountability for their own learning, encouraging them for self-assessment and peer assessment, as well as parent assessment. All right, now let us go back to the topic of our discussion today and looking at the aspect of lack of understanding on school-based assessment or pentaksiran berasaskan sekolah, PBS. I would like to share some insights on the policy itself. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2010, a holistic and integrated assessment called National Educational Assessment System, or commonly known as Sistem Pentaksiran Pendidikan Kebangsaan, SPPK, was introduced. Now, the rationale for introducing SPPK is first to achieve the aspiration of the national philosophy of education towards developing learners' physical, emotional, spiritual, and intellectual abilities. Second is to reduce exam-oriented learning among learners. Third, to evaluate learners' learning development and progress. And fourth, to enhance teachers' integrity in assessing, recording, and reporting of learners' learning. Now, in a nutshell, SPPK was designed to assess learners' profile, achievement, development, and involvement through 5 various modes. First, the school-based assessment, or PBS, which consists of 4 components. All right, so that's 4. And the last would be the standardized and centralized examination, 4 plus 1, right? Now, let us be clear about what PBS means in our Malaysian and KPM contexts. PBS is not only the assessments that take place in a classroom, but it consists of 4 major components. The classroom assessment, okay, the central assessment, the physical activity, sports and co-curricular assessment, and the psychometric assessment. Now, the main purpose of SPPK is to ensure the becomingness of our learners, kemenjadian murid, as aspired in the national philosophy of education. So now let's look at classroom assessment, which Cik Nakia has already shared with us her own experience in conducting the assessments in the classroom. Okay, when we talk about classroom assessment, which is the PBD, all right, it's one of the academic components of PBS. We always confuse that, but be clear now that PBD is one of the components of PBS. It actually emphasizes on collecting first-hand information about learners' learning based on the DSKP. Okay, now to ensure that assessment improves the ability and the mastery level of the learners, teachers can carry out formative as well as summative assessments that provide constructive feedback and feed forward for them. This information can be used to help teachers to plan effective teaching and learning activities for their learners, while for the learners, they'll be able to identify their strengths and weaknesses and work on how to strengthen or improve their learning. Now let's go to the central assessment, which is another academic component of PBS. So central assessment, it reports learners' achievements in academic subjects. All right, so it's a centralized assessment whereby the accountability of each administration is shared between schools and the examination syndicate. It is conducted and carried out by teachers in schools using instruments, scoring rubrics, guidelines, timeline, and procedures prepared by the examination syndicate. Central assessment is implemented in the summative form according to the timetable set by the examination syndicate. An example of central assessment is Pentaksiran Tingkatan 3 or PT3. Okay, now let's look at the physical activity, sports, and co-curricular assessment, the third component of PBS, and this is a non-academic component of PBS. So PAJSK, all right, it consists of co-curricular, health, and physical fitness assessments. The co-curricular assessment comprises three main activities, which are society or club, uniform units, and sports or games. PAJSK is meant to accommodate an assessment on extracurricular activities that can be used in all national schools throughout the year. Learners' excellence in co-curricular activities is shown through their active participation, involvement, and achievement in activities at various levels such as school, district, state, national, as well as international. Next is the assessment of physical fitness through three distinctive physical activities using the National Physical Fitness Standards or SEGA. Another important aspect in keeping the learners physically fit is the body mass index or BMI. Collecting learners' BMI is important as learners can keep track of their weight and teachers and parents could carry out intervention program if there is a need. Now, let's look at what psychometric assessment is, which is the fourth component of PBS and is another non-academic component. Now, psychometric assessment is actually a profiling used to gather information that could portray characteristics, attributes, or individual psychological traits. It is also introduced to measure learners' innate and acquired abilities, such as personality, career interest, aptitude, thinking skills, and learning styles. The goal of this assessment is actually to help learners realize their potential and subsequently use this information to help them progress in their learning accordingly. Various instruments or inventories are prepared for learners at different levels. Examples are the General Aptitude Test at Year 3, Multiple Intelligences Inventory at Year 6 and Form 3, Personality Trait Inventory at Form 1 and Form 4, Career Interest Inventory at Form 1 and Form 3, and Career Maturity Inventory at Form 5. So we have talked about 4 components of PBS, and now we're going to talk about the last mode of assessment under SPPK, which is the standardized and centralized examinations. Okay. So these examinations are conducted solely by the examination syndicate with the help of the appointed examination personnel. Examination syndicate handles all the processes involved in the exams, including the item building, the instrument development, administration, scoring, and also reporting. Now, the exams are administered based on a fixed timetable and standardized instruments. Among the exams in Malaysia are the UPSR at primary level, which is abolished starting 2021, and SPM, SVM, STPM, and STAM at secondary level. Aside from UPSR, the rest of the exams are for certification purposes. So, Puan Izzy, I think that's all about SPPK that I can share with you now. So, back to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rahima, for the comprehensive sharing on the NEAS policy, which includes 5 modes: school-based assessment, which comprises 4 components, as well as the standardized and centralized examinations. This overview provides us with important insights about assessment that we are aspiring for, as stated in the National Education Blueprint 2013 to 2025. We want to produce learners who can perform at the global standards. At this point, Dr. Rahima, it's pertinent that you explain to us how this policy implicates our present assessment system.
Thank you for the question, Puan Izzy. As I have mentioned just now, that SPPK was designed to ensure the becomingness of our learners in all aspects, not only focusing on their academic achievements or cognitive abilities, but also their affective and also psychomotor abilities. Therefore, MOE proposed some changes in the assessment system. First, the reduction of over-reliance and over-dependence on grades and scores obtained through the standardized examinations for information about learners in the school system. Second, the empowerment given to schools and teachers to conduct quality assessment of, assessment for, and assessment as learning to their own learners. Third, the introduction of psychometric tests to help schools and teachers gather more information about their own learners so that they may understand them better, their innate and acquired abilities, their strengths, their weaknesses, talents, attitudes, aptitudes, interests, and personalities. Fourth, the assessment of learners' participation, involvement, and performance in various co-curricular and extracurricular activities systematically and objectively. Finally, it is the introduction and implementation of standard-based or standard referenced assessment to ensure the performance of our learners are comparable to accepted world standards in various areas of knowledge, skills, and competence. In other words, educational assessment involves the process of gathering of information about what learners know, what they can do, and how they can practice through various techniques and forms of assessment before a teacher can make professional judgment of the learner's learning, development, or progress. These techniques can range from a very formal and structured procedure that all of us are familiar with, such as the exams and standardized tests, all the way to the informal and non-structured procedures, like a conversation and informal meetings. Now, these informal and non-structured approaches are very effective to gather authentic information about our learners' abilities. Now, these are some of the implications of the changes made in our educational assessment. It is not something totally new to us teachers, as we have been doing it all this while. The main focus now is for us to make sure that whenever learners go through any form of assessment, they'll be able to have fun as well as meaningful learning, and also they'll learn how to learn, a skill which is very much needed and useful in their future. As for us teachers, we as adult learners have to continue learning in making our teaching, learning, and assessment interesting and meaningful to our learners. There are many challenges, no doubt about it, but we have to be strong and never ever give up. We have to equip ourselves with necessary knowledge and skills in the area of educational assessment so that we are confident with and the stakeholders will have the trust in our professional judgments of our learners' learning disabilities. With that, Puan Izni, I hand over back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rahima, for the explanation on the implications of the policy in the assessment system. Ladies and gentlemen, from the explanation, it is evident that the assessment system is being shaped to focus on both academic and non-academic performance of the learners. The perspective on assessment now is new to us. We have to shift from the traditional view that assessment equals to performance via grades and marks. As much as grades and marks are important, the focus now is on the process of learning that produces positive student outcomes. Ladies and gentlemen, with the NEAS policy in place, several divisions under the Ministry of Education have been assigned with specific tasks to realize the objectives. Classroom assessment under the purview of IPGM is directed to enhance training on the various aspects and components under classroom assessment. To have more detailed description on this matter, please welcome Encik Zulkifli, a panel for classroom assessment in IPGM.
Assalamualaikum and very good afternoon. Thank you, Izni. It is indeed a pleasure to be in this webinar. Thank you, ELTC, for inviting me. As mentioned by Dr. Rahima and the moderator, the SBA is a holistic assessment which evaluates the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor aspects of learning in accordance with the national education philosophy and the national curriculum. Classroom assessment, or PPD, has been referred to in different ways, such as authentic assessment, alternative assessment, descriptive assessment, performance assessment, and teacher-based assessment. Classroom assessment as the process of collecting, synthesizing, and interpreting information to aid in classroom decision-making. Classroom assessment, or PBD, is a method introduced to measure the development process of continuous student learning. In Malaysia, it involves determining the level of learners' mastery in each subject as stated in the performance standard in the DSKP. For all subjects, the National Preschool Standards-Based Curriculum, KSSR and KSSM. As examination and assessment are two different processes, teachers should have in-depth knowledge in handling both of these processes. Apart from the performance standards, content standards, and learning standards are also referenced in the implementation of a classroom assessment. Content standards are specific statements of what learners should know and be able to do in a period of a schooling covering aspects of knowledge, skill, and values. Learning standard is a set of criteria or indicators of learning quality and measurable achievement for each content standard, while the performance standards is a set of general criteria that indicates the level of mastery that learners need to show as a sign that something has been mastered. Ladies and gentlemen, the objective of classroom assessment is to get an idea of the learner's learning progress of teachers. Through classroom assessment, teachers can track learners' existing knowledge, track learners' overall development, identify learners' strengths and weaknesses in learning from time to time, evaluate the effectiveness of the teaching and learning process, plan, modify, and improve teaching and learning method, and carry out follow-up actions corresponding immediately. Through classroom assessments, learners too can track their own personal development, identify their strengths and weaknesses in learning, and work to improve their personal learning achievement. Next, I would like to discuss the features of a classroom assessment. There are nine main features of classroom assessment, which include assessment activities designed by the teachers, systematic, formative, and summative in nature, involve various methods of assessment, criteria based, emphasize individual development, track the development of holistic learning, enable follow-up action by the teachers, and encourage self-assessment and peer assessment among the learners. In simple words, PBD, which is implemented by the teachers, can help learners overcome learning problems which are identified at an early stage of the teaching and learning process so that weaknesses or issues can be addressed immediately. Thank you, Isni. Back to you.
For enlightening us with interesting facts on the objectives and the nine main features of classroom assessment. This indeed shows that the focus is on every individual learner's path and a robust tracking on the part of the teachers. Very dynamic. Encik Zulkifli, in simple words, how is classroom assessment different from what have been done by the teachers in the classrooms before?
Yes, thank you, Isni. There are definitely some differences between classroom assessment and what had been done by the teachers previously. Unlike standardized testing, which evaluates learners' achievements and teachers' performance once by the end of the educational process, classroom assessment has more powerful evaluations instruction, which provide more emphasis to identify learners' weaknesses and their personal needs. Classroom assessment occupies more of a teacher's time and arguably have a greater impact on instruction and pupil learning than to do the formal measurement procedures. Classroom assessments aims to generate information interactively to the whole educational institution, which will give high priority for the teachers to synthesize and analyze the progress and achievement of learners to make instructional decisions that will be carried out within the classroom setting. Within the last 20 years, researchers have given high priority to formalize the procedures of classroom assessment and extend its functions as it is one of the fundamental process in alternative assessment. Classroom assessment work as the core and is fundamental for achieving a teaching and education proficiency by providing day-to-day help with teaching and learning progressively. Classroom assessment involves the process of collecting and analyzing information as well as making continuous reflection on teaching and learning process in making consistent judgment towards improving the teaching and learning. Proper implementation of classroom assessment will provide a clear picture of learners' mastery of the learning standards set out in the curriculum. All information obtained from assessments is not intended for comparison or competition between learners. Instead, the information should be used to help the school and parents to plan follow-up actions towards improving learners' mastery and achieving in learning. This is different from the traditional teaching process in which teachers provide casual questioning, pencil and paper tests, and informal evaluation. Another difference is related to professional judgment. Professional judgment is the judgment made using professional knowledge of the intended curriculum covering knowledge, skill, values, evidence of achievement, teaching strategies, assessment methods, as well as set criteria and standards. Professional judgment requires teachers to make ethical responsibility decisions about learners' level of mastery based on analysis and summarization of information of learning. Teachers use knowledge, experience, learners' input, and practice professional responsibility in making professional judgments. Teachers also need to keep abreast of the development in the field of discipline of knowledge, pedagogy, and assessment through professional reading and discussion with other educators to improve competence in making professional judgment. When talking about classroom assessment or PBD, we cannot evade from discussing assessment for learning. Assessment for learning is a part of the teaching and learning process. The information obtained from these assessments can be used to plan for strategies or next steps in teaching towards improving learners' learning and their level of mastery. One example is a question and answer activity conducted by a teacher during a lesson. The purpose of the question the purpose of the question and answer is to identify learners' knowledge, skill, and values. Next, assessment as learning. Assessment as learning occurs when learners reflect and evaluate the progress of their learning. These allow them to understand the purpose of their learning and realize what they should do to master a learning objective. Assessments as learning consists of self-assessment and peer assessment. Information from these assessments gives learners an indication of their level of mastery in learning. Assessment of learning. Next, assessment of learning occurs at the end of a period, topic, or area of learning. Usually, the assessment takes place in the form of a summative test. Then, assessment of learning can also take place in the form of a presentation or of project results. Information and data obtained from summative tests or assessments about this learning should be addressed positively in the learner's learning process. The last aspect is interdisciplinary aspect. Classroom assessment can also be interdisciplinary, as assessment strategy conducted for a particular subject can integrate the knowledge and skills learned from other subjects as well. For example, learners can incorporate the knowledge learned from Bahasa Melayu, science, mathematics, and moral or religious education in the classroom assessment that requires them to complete small project or participate in storytelling sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Encik Zulkifli. I'm very much attracted to the idea of professional judgment which was also mentioned by Dr. Rahimah just now, one of the issues we have in relation to classroom assessment is the confidence level among teachers to implement it. This relates to the issue of mindset among teachers mentioned by Cik Nakiah earlier on. It's pertinent for every teacher to be equipped with the knowledge and skills in implementing classroom assessment with great professional judgment. Encik Zulkifli, can you please share with us some insights on how teachers can ensure effective implementation of classroom assessment?
All right, thank you. As for the teacher's role in classroom assessment, teachers play an important role in implementing classroom assessment by determining the learning objectives based on the learning standards to be assessed, planning and building assessment instruments, performing assessments, recording assessments results, analyzing assessments information, reporting and conducting follow-up actions. The first important step is for teachers to have clear understanding on the most important aspect, which is unpacking the curriculum. This process involves teachers making sure that they are well versed with the content of the subject, including the knowledge, skills, and the understanding of the standard that learners should gain or master. To promote the clarity, teachers can apply the UBD, that is, understanding by design. The backward design has three stages. Firstly, to determine the learning outcome based on the standard in the DSKP. Secondly, planning the assessment. Teachers can create questions, activities, or tasks to be assessed and collect appropriate evidence. The third stage is designing the learning progression, plan, which involve these steps using the where to acronym. Okay. W, where to go. Teaching and learning is based on the learning outcome as stated in the DSKP. H, hook, is the activity or task really attractive for learners to participate in? E, equip. How can teachers and peers equip one another to meet the goal? R, rethink. The activity or task assigned to the learners provides the opportunity to rethink, reflect, and relook for improvement. E, evaluate. Learners are allowed to recheck or evaluate their progress in learning process. T, talent. The strategies or approaches chosen by the teachers must suit the learner's capabilities, potential, aptitude, and their multiple intelligences background. And the last one is O, organize. Teachers must ensure that no learners is left behind. Everybody must be given the opportunity to be involved in the learning process. These are some tips to help teachers play their roles to ensure the effective implementation of classroom assessment or pentaksiran bilik darjah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Encik Zulkifli. I truly like the idea of UBD, which has three stages. First, determining the learning objectives. Second, planning the assessment. And third, designing the learning progression plan. It's a kind of a framework that gives clear instructions for teachers in implementing classroom assessment. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a tour on the dynamics of the implementation of classroom assessment in the classrooms. For this, we are privileged to have Dr. Abdul Hadi, who is also in the Classroom Assessment panel in IPGM. Please welcome Dr. Hadi.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Izni. It is an honor to be in this webinar. I would like to thank ELTC for inviting me. Ladies and gentlemen, as mentioned by my colleague, Encik Zulkifli, there are several stages in the process of PBD implementation. Let me take you through 5 stages as highlighted in the Classroom Assessment Implementation Handbook. The first stage is planning, teaching, and learning and assessment method. At this stage, teachers must examine and understand the content of each topic in the SKP. Teachers should also determine the learning objective that the learner needs to achieve and which the teacher wants to assess. The learning objective must be in line with the identified content standard and learning standard. Next, teachers should determine appropriate methods of assessment through learning activities such as storytelling, quizzes, role-playing, simulation, and simple projects. The second stage is implementing the teaching and learning as well as assessment. Teachers can perform assessment on an ongoing basis in teaching and learning using oral, written methods, and observation. The third stage is to record and analyze learners' mastery. Recording can be made on the form of statement making, marking using symbols, giving marks, and giving grades. Next, record can be done in the teaching record book, teacher's notebook, checklist, and reporting templates. The fourth stage is the follow-up action. At this stage, teachers can make follow-up action immediately or plan with the aim of improving the performance level of each learner. For example, teachers can use various effective teaching and learning techniques in accordance with the level of ability of the learners concerned. The fifth stage is to report the performance level of the learners. At this stage, learners' development and progress can be reported orally or in writing, including the performance level of the learners, the statement of interest, attitude, and behavior of the learners. Suggestion for follow-up action to increase the potential of the learners by the subject teacher and the classroom teacher involved. As for the reporting procedure, reporting is a process of delivering assessment information from time to time on the progress and acquisition of knowledge, mastery of skill, application of values, development of attitude, and achievement of learners presented to stakeholders, especially parents. Through reporting, parents can monitor their child's learning progress and level of mastery. In terms of procedures in general, it involves the collection of assessment data, professional judgment of teachers, filling in data on the reporting template, and the making a report to the relevant parties, especially parents. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to share a sample of PB reports from Sekolah Kebangsaan Pakatan Jaya Ipoh Perak. The headmaster of this Transformational School 2025 or TS25 is Mr. Nohan bin Suid. The school uses templates provided by the Ministry of Education for the reporting procedure. Among things being reported are student performance record, students reports, subject report, and graph report. The student mastery level is determined based on the evidence of achievement. On top of that, teachers in this school have been applying their professional judgment, as mentioned by Encik Zulkifli earlier, which is a process that requires teachers to make ethical and responsible decisions about the student level of mastery based on their knowledge, experience, professional responsibility, and student inputs. I would also like to share a video on the discussion process in determining student mastery level. This video was recorded before the COVID-19 pandemic. During the COVID-19 pandemic, especially when implementing remote learning, the medium of discussion is shifted to Google Meet.
That's indeed a very interesting sharing, Dr. Hadi. I'm sure teachers have a better understanding and some directions to follow now. Just out of curiosity, in the context of home-based teaching and learning, how can teachers implement classroom assessment?
In my point of view, classroom assessment implementation during normal condition and during remote teaching and learning are similar. Teaching, learning, and assessment are interconnected or inseparable. In the implementation of PVD, assessment is implemented through learning activities. In the past, during normal time, PVD implementation was done face-to-face in the classroom. Teachers are recommended to run the assessment through activities like storytelling, quizzes, simulation, role play, and simple project. Instruments that can be used to assess learning modules, worksheets, checklists, simple project done by the learners. A good example was described by Cik Nurul Nakiah in her sharing. Meanwhile, in the context of PDPR, teachers are the ones who will bring learning activities to the learners. At the same time, assessment activities for the learners are done through learning activities either through offline learning, online learning, or off-site learning. Thank you, Izni.
It's fascinating to know that classroom assessment during home-based teaching and learning can take place through online learning when learners utilize gadgets with internet connection for real-time learning. Offline learning happens when learners learn using textbooks or gadgets without internet connection, and off-site learning occurs when the offline learning occurs when the learning process takes place at community, quarantine, or evacuation centers established during natural disasters or pandemic. As we have discussed thus far, the way forward where assessment is concerned is initiating strategies to embrace classroom assessment as our culture. For instance, schools can create a team consisting administrators, teachers, parents, and learners to help shape positive changes in the school culture. Strengthening the professional learning community and professional learning network among teachers can also be beneficial to provide more support. Ladies and gentlemen, We cannot build a future for our children, but we can certainly build our children for the future. With the development in our education system, the onus is on us in the education arena to embrace new shifts to ensure that our children will be able to perform and reach the global standards. This webinar hopes to bring insights into the better understanding of This webinar hopes to bring insights into the better understanding of school-based assessment and strategies for teachers to conduct classroom assessment. On behalf of English Language Teaching Center, Ministry of Education, we'd like to extend our gratitude to bahagian Sumber Teknologi Pendidikan, Lembaga Peperiksaan, Institut Pendidikan Guru Malaysia, and Jabatan Pendidikan Negeri Terengganu for facilitating this webinar successfully. Till we meet again, thank you.